So this craft starts out with an unusual item, a hair roller from the Dollar Tree. And what I'm going to do here is I'm taking the little circle off of the top of the hair roller. And you can see that there's a metal rod in the hair roller. And that's what we're going to use for our craft. So what we're going to do with this metal rod is I'm going to fold it in the shape of a V, and then we're going to shape it into the shape of a heart. And using the two little hooks on this metal rod, we're going to hook them together. And once you're satisfied with your heart, I'm using a set of pliers and I'm just going to smush down those little hooks so that everything stays in place. So let's grab a spool of twine, and I'm using a 5-inch piece of twine, and I'm going to cut about 20 pieces. It'll just depend on how big your heart is on how many pieces you'll need. And to vary it up with the twine, I'm also going to use some macrame rope, and I'm going to cut those in 5-inch slices as well, and we'll need about 20 pieces of those for this heart. Now we have all of our pieces ready. Let's put this all together. I'm taking one of the pieces of twine to start, and I'm making a U shape. And then I'm going to place the heart over the top. And then we'll take the 2 strings on the end and put that through the U, slide that over the heart and tighten that up. Now let's watch that again using the macrame rope. Now this is the fun part. You just repeat this over and over again until the whole entire heart is completely covered with the different twines and macrame rope. Once you are satisfied with your heart, we'll flip the heart over and lay that out flat. Now grab a small bowl and some Mod Podge, and I'm using the matte Mod Podge because I don't want any shine to this little heart, and I'm just spraying a tiny bit of water in there. I'm not using very much, but I just wanted to thin out that Mod Podge a little bit. Now I'm taking a paintbrush and I'm just going to paint where the knots were on the front side of this heart. I need to set that aside to dry for about a half an hour. Once that is completely dried, what we're going to do is untwist all of the twine and the macrame rope around the heart. Now let's comb everything out so everything is nice and straight, and this will remove a lot of fuzz from your twine. Once you're satisfied with your combing, I take a pair of really sharp scissors, and I'm going to start by trimming around the outside edge, leaving about 1 inch of the overhang. And once I've completed that, I'll go ahead and trim it down a little bit more to about 1/2 inch around the heart. So I wanted to find a way to hang this heart. So I'm taking a really thin piece of twine, and I'm going to tie a knot around the heart itself first, and then leave the 2 tails left out so that I could hang this however I'd like. You could tie those together to hang them as an ornament. I haven't decided yet where I'm going to hang this, so I left them open. Now a few final touches. In the center of the heart, I'm going to add a sheer bow, and I'm just hot gluing that to the center. And I thought that that bow needed just a tiny bit more, so I took that same thin twine and I cut another little bow. I'm going to attach that over the top of that sheer ribbon. And now this beautiful little heart is ready to hang. You could hang this on a tiered tray, on top of a photo, or you could put this as an ornament on a tree. I love finding things that are ordinary and transforming them into Christmas. This home decor piece I found at Dollar Tree, and we're going to deconstruct it. And this is really easy to do. There's just a few staples on the back side, so I'm using a screwdriver and a pair of pliers, and I'm just pulling out those staples. And I'm going to save the twine and the beads to use in a later project, and we're just going to use these circles. I do want to remove the paper from the tops of these circles, so I'm using a little bit of water and some wet paper towels, and I'm just going to lay those over the top, and this will allow the paper to loosen up so it'll be easy to scrape off any of that excess paper. The tool that I'm using to scrape this off is just my Cricut scraper, but you could use like a paint scraper. That would work just as well. And once everything is removed, I do grab my zip sander, but a sanding block would work great. And I just sand the top off just to make sure I get any of that extra glue off of the round. So this craft was inspired by Sammy at Unicorn Dust and Design. She did this wonderful project using sheet music. And so I printed out some sheet music, Oh Holy Night, Christmas Tree, and Jingle Bells. What I did is I shrunk the image down a little bit because I wanted more of the notes to be on the small ornament here. And I just went ahead and I traced a circle around the title and some of that sheet music. And I'm going to cut these out. And now that we have all 3 of our sets of sheet music cut out, I'm taking these up to the kitchen and I'm using some Irish breakfast black tea from Trader Joe's. And I'm just going to brew up a small little container of this. And one of the things that I saw Sammy do for staining was using the actual tea bag to stain everything. And I've never done that before. Usually I just soak this in tea. So I thought that was a really cool idea. So I'm trying this out. And this worked fantastic. So thank you, Sammy, for this inspiration. Next, I'm going to go around each of these little circles and I'm just going to tear the edge. And with it wet from the tea, this makes it really easy. To assist in the dry time, I'm going to lay these out on a small cookie sheet and put these in the oven at 250 for about 10 minutes. Now let's go back to our little rounders. I'm taking some painter's tape and I'm just taping them down to a paintable surface. These are just small scrap pieces of cardboard. Once I have everything set up, I am going to take my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and give a nice coat of paint over the top layer of these rounders. And once that paint has dried, I grab my Mod Podge in matte and I'm doing a coat of Mod Podge over the top of the paint. Now once that Mod Podge is dry on all 3 of our rounders, I'm going to grab that sheet music that's out of the oven. And we'll start out with the one that says, Oh Holy Night. And I am centering this on my rounder. And if you notice on these rounders from Dollar Tree, they have a little notch out of them at the top and the bottom. So I want that to be at the top of my ornament and the other one on the bottom of my ornament. And using a piece of parchment paper and a hot iron, I am just going to iron on these pieces of sheet music to our little rounders. Then we will repeat this step on our other 2 rounders. So I lay down the sheet music on top of the dried Mod Podge, and then I take a piece of parchment paper and layer that over the top. And using a hot iron or a heat press, you just iron that piece of paper down, and what this will do is allow the Mod Podge to adhere to the back side of that sheet music, and everything will stick down with no wrinkles. And then just remove that piece of parchment paper and save it for another time. And now that our rounders have the sheet music attached, I do take that same Mod Podge in matte and I'm going to do a coat of Mod Podge over the top of the sheet music to seal everything in. Now once our Mod Podge is completely dry, I'm taking some black multi-surface paint from Folk Art, and this is in satin, and I'm putting a little of that in a bowl. And using a very small brush, I'm going to do the outside rim or perimeter in black. And having these on that piece of cardboard makes it really easy to do that outside painting. And then while the paint is still wet, I'm taking a different brush, and this brush is completely dry. And I'm just going to go around the outside of the circle on the front side. And I'm just going in a downward motion and just feathering a little bit of distressing around the outside edge of these ornaments. Now, once everything is dry, let's go ahead and decorate the fronts of each of these ornaments. And I chose these songs specifically to decorate them differently. So, Oh Holy Night, I'm taking a decal, and I cut this out on my Cricut Joy using a already made template inside Cricut Design Space. just going to center this in my little round. And this is really similar to a sign that Sammy made over on Unicorn Dust and Designs in a much larger scale. Just to make sure nothing peels off, I did do another small coat of my Mod Podge and matte over the top of the decal. Now for the final step on this ornament, I am taking some 1/4" satin ribbon and I'm making what looks like a little fish, and I'm hot gluing that at the bottom where the tails are. And once that hot glue sets, I'm going to hot glue this on the back side of the ornament. And this allows for a beautiful loop hanger that looks high end, but is really simple to do. And then we'll just hot glue that to the back and flip it over. Next, I'm going to put a little satin bow on here. And this is the same ribbon I used for the hanger. And I'm just trimming this up because it's a little bit bigger than what I would like. And I'm going to hot glue this to the top. But I want to make sure we can still see the words, "Oh Holy Night." So I'm just going to go really high up at the top there so we can see the title of our song. And our first ornament in our set is complete. I love how this turns out. It's just a classic look. It looks very high end, but was very easy to make. Now for our second ornament in this set, I am using a little wood star that I had in my stash, and I'm just going to tape this down to a paintable surface. And we'll use our multi-surface from Folk Art in black and paint this star on the front and around the perimeter. Now grabbing our Oh Christmas Tree ornament, I'm going to make that same loop where I take the 1/4" satin ribbon, I hot glue it at the bottom and make a little fish, and then I flip the ornament over, and then I'm going to hot glue the little X at the bottom of the fish onto the back of our ornament. Now it's time to decorate the front of this ornament, and I am using that little star we painted and a little pick, and I just cut this out of a pine pick that I had, and I shaped it in the shape of a Christmas tree. And using some hot glue, I just put that down at the bottom of our ornament. And while we have our hot glue out, I'm going to hot glue our little bow at the top of the ornament. Now for the star on top of the tree, I did not want to use hot glue because I am not that good with hot glue to get that into a thin line like that. So I'm taking my Elaine's tacky glue and I'm just going to paint the back of the star with the Elaine's tacky glue. And this will make it easier for me to place this on the top of our tree. And it does dry clear, so you don't need to worry about any excess there. And I just put that on the top of our little tree. And now here is our second ornament in our trio. I love how this turns out, and I love how you can just mix things up with the ornament a little bit just to give it its own individual flair. So for our last ornament in this set, I am going to do the same thing with that 1/4" ribbon, and we'll make that little fish, and we're going to hot glue that on the back for our hanger. Once that has dried, we can flip that over and we can decorate the front. And this one is Jingle Bells, so as you can guess, we are going to use some bells on the front of this. I did take a small piece of a pick from Christmas, and I just hot glued that to the front. And I'm taking the bells and I'm going to hot glue that to the bottom so they look like little berries on the pick. Now once those bells are attached, I hot glue the bow to the very top. And our third ornament in this set is complete. I just love how this turns out. I like all three of these ornaments. I'm not sure if I have a favorite, but I'd love to hear if you enjoyed these ornaments and if you have a favorite. So please leave a comment below on which one of these ornaments were your favorite. Oh Holy Night, Oh Christmas Tree, or Jingle Bells. These adorable spindles are from Woodpecker Crafts, and I did get these on Amazon, but I believe you can also get these on their website. For this craft, I'm going to use 3 spindles and these eye hooks, and I'm using a pair of pliers, and this is how I install the eye hooks onto my spindles. I put the eye hook into my needle nose pliers there, and I'm going to hold that straight, and then twisting the spindle, I screw that into the eye hook. And this takes just a few minutes, and I'm able to do 3 of them real quickly to do this craft. And now that I have my 3 spindles ready, I am going to put these onto a paintable surface and grab out some Waverly chalk paint in the color white. And I made a huge mess here, so if it were me again and I was doing this, I would probably put on a pair of gloves because I got paint all over myself. But I'm just going to paint a nice coat of white paint over the tops and all around these spindles. Once I had all 3 of these painted, I thought that was a little bit too much paint, so I grabbed my baby wipes and I wiped them all down again. So they kind of look like they're whitewashed at this point, and you could totally stop here, but I was going to go a step further, of course. So I grabbed my Delta Creative Luxe Metal Silver and a little bit of the Luxe Metal White, and I'm going to mix those 2 colors together in a bowl. And these paints both have a shimmer to them, and I thought that these would look nice on our Christmas tree because I like to have a little bit of sparkle going on the tree, but this is not too much sparkle. And this was a little bit more silver than I wanted, so I did add a little bit more of that white, and I lightened it up a little bit. I'm going to take my brush and do a light coat over the top of all of these different spindles. Once those are dry, I did want to lighten it up a little bit, so I took my Delta Creative Luxe Metal White, and we're going to do a light dry brush over the entire spindle. Once all of these are coated and dried, I'm taking my Mod Podge gloss spray, and I'm going to just spray down each of these spindles to seal them in. Once all of these spindles are sealed, let's go ahead and add our hanger. I decided to use a sheer ribbon, and this sheer ribbon has like a silver grayish tint to it. So I'm going to add that to my eye hook, and I'll make a nice little loop and tie a knot at the top. Now we could stop there, but I thought it would be nice to add a little bow to each one of these. So I am going to hot glue a little bow using the same sheer ribbon to each one of these spindles. So now here's our trio set. These turned out adorable, and this craft is so easy to do. This is perfect for a fun little craft night with some friends. So you've probably seen these ornaments at the Dollar Tree during the Christmas season, and this is a great little ornament staple that you can do all sorts of fun things with. And I want to show you something that's a little bit different. I did get this inspiration from Sammy over at Unicorn Dust and Designs, and she does some adorable ornaments using the same technique. I'm starting out by using my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster, and I'm just giving a nice coat to the outside of this ornament. Next, I'm going to go ahead and grab my soft white clay and a little mold that I have. And I'm using the little leaf-looking mold piece in this set. And I'm just going to make a bunch of these. And I ended up making 12 little clay pieces. If you're curious about the clay and the mold, they're both from Stampery. The clay is really easy to work with, and the mold works amazing. So if you're interested, I will put links in my description box. So now that we have all of our little holly leaves made, I'm taking my Elaine's tacky glue and I'm going to add these to our ornament. Now the clay has not completely dried yet, so it's really easy to mold it onto our ornament, which is amazing. But once you're done, you do have to let this sit for 24 hours for it to dry before you can go ahead and do any painting. Now here is what it looks like the next day. And you could just paint this white and leave it alone, add a Christmas bow and hang this, but I decided that I wanted to go a step further, and I'm just using a lid so I can stand this up easily. I'm using my Tuscan teal from Apple Barrel, and I'm going to completely cover this ornament with the Tuscan teal. And I'm using a chip brush for this because that will allow for me to get in between all the little crevices in this clay pieces. I did end up doing 2 full coats of this teal to make sure that it was very well coated. Now, once your paint has dried, I'm using my Waverly white wax, and I'm using a lint-free cloth, and I'm just going to go ahead and wipe this all over my ornament. And this is going to make those clay pieces stand out amazing. And once you're done applying your wax, I put this back onto the lid to allow it to dry overnight. And then the next morning, all you need to do is put the lid right back onto your ornament, and your ornament is all ready to hang on the tree. I love how this turns out. This is such a different way of doing an ornament. It gives a vintage look to it. So for this craft, we're going to start out with these fun snowflake napkins from Home Goods and some foam cones that I got at Walmart. We're going to start out by just cutting out a snowflake that will cover the full bottom of our cone. And now that we have our piece cut out, we're going to remove the bottom 2 layers of the napkin. These napkins are 3-ply, and we just want the top part of this napkin. Next, I'm going to use my Mod Podge, and we're going to paint the bottom of the cone with the Mod Podge. And we don't let this dry. We're just going to set the napkin right on top of that cone. And I just lightly smooth out the napkin until I feel it is in place. And once the Mod Podge has dried, I take my zip sander and I sand in a downward motion and remove any excess napkin. Now I set the cone aside and I grabbed a wine cork, and I'm going to take this wine cork and I'm going to cut it about 1/3 of the way down. And we're going to take that little piece and we're going to use that for putting together our tree. Before we get too far on this tree, I do want to make a hanger. So I'm just using some sheer ribbon, about 1/4 of an inch wide, and I tie a small knot on the bottom, and we're going to take some hot glue and just hot glue that to the tip of our cone. Now we're going to grab some hot glue and use some of that chunky yarn, and all I'm going to do is wrap this yarn around the cone, hot gluing about every 1.5 inches or so to make sure everything stays in place. And when we get to the top of the cone, cover the hook with the yarn completely and just hot glue everything in place. And now for our last step, we're going to take that wine cork that we cut earlier and hot glue that to the bottom of our cone. And now our tree is complete and it's ready to hang for your winter decor. And if you're enjoying this video, please hit that subscribe button below. So we're going to start this craft out with an ornament I got at the Dollar Tree. And we're starting out by just removing the greenery and the pine cone from this piece. And once we have everything removed, I am going to attach a hanger to it before we get too far. So I just cut a piece of ribbon and I'm just going to hot glue that into the top of this faux pine cone. Now I have this white fur that I used for a previous craft, and I'm just going to cut a strip of this fur out, and we're going to use this as a beard for our pine cone. And so we're going to take this and just wrap it around the pine cone and hot glue it. Once the glue is completely dried, I'm going to grab a pair of sharp scissors and we're just going to trim the fur up and around the pine cone to give it a beard shape. This next step, I just use some scrap fabric, and you can use whatever color fabric that you have around the house or in your craft room. I'm sure you collect a lot if you're like me. And I'm just going to fold the fabric to make what looks like a little brim of a hat. And now I'm going to take that fabric and I'm going to wrap that around our ornament here. And I'm just going to attach that with some hot glue. And I just am folding the fabric where I'd like to, just so I don't have to worry about the edges, to make sure it looks nice. And I'm hot gluing everything into place. And don't worry if you're covering the top of the pine cone, you want to do that. So just make this look like a stocking hat. Once you're satisfied with your hot gluing, I just went ahead and I used another little piece of scrap fabric and I tied that around the top of our fabric to make it look like a little stocking hat. And I'm just going to tie that around 2 or 3 times just to get it to the length that I want and make sure everything stays into place. Now I'm going to go ahead and hot glue a little bead for a nose for our little gnome. And now our little snow gnome is complete and ready to display. So for this craft, we're going to take some small canvases that I got from Walmart and this ready to pour apple barrel paint. For our next step here, we're going to prep our little canvases. I'm using a bottle cap and a piece of painter's tape, and I'm taping a bottle cap underneath each one of these canvases. This will lift them up so the paint will have a place to drip off. And to catch all the extra paint, I'm going to use a disposable lid to set everything inside of. Next, I'm going to get my paints ready to go here. And I'm using 3 different colors. There's a black, light blue, and beige. I have a feeling this process is going to be a little bit messy, so I decided to wear some disposable gloves. So with being new to paint and pouring, I am just going to take this in stride and we're just going to drip a little bit of paint in different colors all over the canvas and see how this goes. I had about 80% of the canvas covered. I went ahead and lifted it up and just lightly slid the paint going in multiple directions until I liked the design. And I did notice that on this first canvas, I got a few little bubbles. So once we're done moving around the paint, we're going to set that down and I'm going to grab a skewer. And taking that skewer, I just went ahead and popped any of the bubbles. When I was done popping the bubbles, I decided, let's just go ahead and do a little design using the skewer and the paint and see what it looks like. So I just kind of moved the paint around a little bit using my skewer. And as I said, there's no right or wrong way to do this with the paint. It's just whatever you like that makes you happy. Next, we just repeat this on the other 2 little canvases. And each time they turned out a little bit different. And I felt like the more I did this, the better they started looking. When I got to the 3rd painting, I started doing a little bit more of a design with my paint, and I ended up doing almost 90% of the painting with the paint. So I did do a little bit more paint, but the swirls turned out really nice in that last one. So you can kind of see you want 80 to 90% of the canvas covered when you're doing these cute little paintings. And once you finish pouring paint on your little canvases, I set these aside for overnight so that they will have plenty of time to dry. So for the next step here, I'm using a package of these hearts that I got at the Dollar Tree, and I just picked a few that I thought would be great to paint, and I'm going to add these later on to my canvas. So what I did here is I just added a little painter's tape so I could tape those down to a paintable surface, which makes them so much easier to paint so they're not moving around on you. You're wondering why I'm going with these different colors for Valentine's Day. My daughter is anti-pink, and so I wanted to make something that I thought she might like. So that's why I'm using blue and black and off-white, just because I thought my daughter would really like something that was not pink. And if you didn't catch the earlier slide, I was using plaster paint for this off-white. It's from Waverly Chalk Paint. So 24 hours later, we're going to start putting together our little canvas ornaments. I'm taking these ornaments and I'm going to add a 1/4 inch thick ribbon to each canvas, and I'm just going to hot glue them to the back. This will be a great hanger for these, and I felt like that off-white ribbon just really mellowed everything out and made it look really nice. Now that we have our ribbon attached, we're going to flip these back over and we're going to grab our hearts that we painted earlier. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to hot glue some of these hearts on top of the paintings. And we're going to do 2 hearts on this first one here and a single heart on the last one. And for the center canvas, we're going to leave that one blank without any hearts or charms. Let me know in the comments below what you think you like best, with the heart or without the hearts. So I walked by these signs at the Dollar Tree the other day, and I thought, you know what? If I took those apart, those could be some really great backgrounds for a ornament. So I was like, well, for $1.25, I'm getting 3 ornaments and I'm getting some extra beads. So I am going to buy these and we're going to take this all apart. So now that we have our 3 bases for our ornaments, I want to remove the paper that is on here, and to remove the glue, I'm just spraying these down with some water. And I thought that might be enough to scrape everything off, but I found that I needed to actually soak these. So I took a paper towel that was wet and I laid them over the top of these. And then after a few minutes, I was able to just scrape the paper right off. And to make sure everything was nice and smooth and removed, I used a sanding block and I just sanded everything down. And then I repeated this on the other 2 blocks as well. I will not show you those with the magic of video. We'll just go straight on to the next step. This napkin is one of my favorite Christmas napkins. So you've probably seen me use it in other videos as well. But I did get this napkin at Home Goods in 2023. I am going to start out by just removing the back 2 layers of this napkin so that we can prep everything for decoupaging. Now, I did use 3 napkins for this project because one of the quadrants on the napkin has a foil inlay inside the napkin, and I wanted that piece to be on every one of these ornaments because, you know, ornaments need to sparkle, and I thought that that would look better. So you see me pointing that out there. I'll save the other quadrants of the napkin for other projects for the Christmas season. Going back to our board, I'm just taking a little piece of painter's tape and I'm taping that down to a piece of cardboard, which will make it easier when I decide to paint this. I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, and I'm painting a nice coat over the top of this little board. Now, once your paint has completely dried, I take my matte Mod Podge, but you can use whatever you like better, and I just do a nice thin coat over the top of this paint. And I'm going to paint all 3 of these ornaments. So what you're going to see me do here is we're going to do the same background on all 3 ornaments. However, we're going to change the fronts of them and do different things. And I like doing this because I like to put things in sets of 3 on my Christmas tree. And so this kind of gives me 3 different ornaments, but they all are kind of tied together. Once your Mod Podge is completely dry, I set down my napkin on top and I take my heat press or a hot iron and I just iron that down into place. This warms up the Mod Podge and allows the napkin to adhere perfectly to this piece, and it takes out all the wrinkles. So it looks very nice and professionally done. Now I'm grabbing my favorite tool in my toolbox, my zip sander, and I'm just going to sand this down in a downward motion and remove all of that excess napkin, giving a perfect edge on everything. I return the piece back to the piece of cardboard taped down, and using some Mod Podge, I'm just going to seal everything in. And you just need a light coat of your Mod Podge. And you can use glossy if you'd like, but I use matte on this. And now that everything is dry, I'm using my Cerakote Luxe Metal Gold. And this acrylic paint is amazing. I love it. It goes on so easily. I just put this on with a small paintbrush, and I'm just going to do the borders on this board. And now that we have all 3 of our boards prepped, let's go ahead and decorate these in 3 different ways. The first one here, I'm taking one of these tags I got from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just taping that down to a paintable surface. And using my Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster, I'm going to give this a nice coat. And to cover those white lines that are on that little tag, it did take 3 coats to cover everything. Now I wanted to give this just a little bit of shimmer, so I'm using a Cerakote Delta Creative Luxe Metallic White. And I did 1 coat over the top of the tag just to give that little bit of a sparkle. I'm grabbing this fun stencil that I found on Amazon, and I'm going to cut out the one that says, "Have yourself a Merry Christmas." And I just want the word Merry on this little sign. So I'm going to position it so that Merry is in the center. Using some painter's tape, I'm just going to cover up anything that I don't want to stencil onto the tag that might get in my way for me to just do the word Merry. For the stenciling, I'm going to use the Cerakote Luxe Metal Gold again. And using a sponge brush, I'm going to just lightly tap over the stencil with the paint. This paint is a little bit thin, so I'm just being really careful because I don't want any bleeding. Now, before the paint dries, I do remove the stencil, and then I allow this to dry for about 20 minutes. Let's put together our first ornament. I'm going to take some hot glue and hot glue the sign just to the front of this ornament. And once that is secure, we'll go ahead and hot glue a little bow over the top of the hole to cover that up. To make my hanger, I'm using a 1/4 inch satin ribbon, and I'm taking some hot glue and I just hot glue it at the bottom together. I don't want a knot there, but I want a really nice loop at the top. So that makes it so it's a little bit flatter against the back. And then I'm just going to hot glue that to the back of the ornament. And now this Merry ornament is ready to hang on your tree. For ornament number 2 in our series, I'm taking this greenery that I had from the Dollar Tree last year, and this is a snow greenery. Sometimes you can find this greenery all year round, depending on how well your Dollar Tree stocks up. I just really liked the color on this. It had that nice snow look to it, and I thought this would go really well on this ornament. So what I did was I cut 2 little pieces of the greenery off. And I am just going to hot glue them to the center in the shape of a wreath. And if you need to, you may have to cut the edge just a little bit closer, just so everything looks like it's one long piece. And now that our wreath is in place, let's decorate our wreath. I'm using some vase filler that I found from the Dollar Tree last year. And I'm just going to use 5 little gold balls. But you can cut little balls off of any sort of picks that you may have, or you could do mini buttons or something like that. But there's a lot of different things you could do to decorate it. And if you want, you could just put a bow on there and not do any decorations. Let's go ahead and make our hanger. I'm using that same satin ribbon, and I'm just hot gluing it at the bottom so it's nice and flat. And then I'm hot gluing that to the back of our ornament. Now here's our finished little ornament. I think this one turns out adorable. I love how that satin ribbon gives it more of an elevated look. This next one, I'm using some ribbon that I had left over from Walmart last year. And I cut 2 strips of ribbon, and I made one in the shape of a V, and then the other one I just hot glued as a loop. Next, I squished them together in the center, and using a little piece of pipe cleaner, I'm going to tighten that up and make the bow shape. And now I'm going to just trim a little bit of that extra pipe cleaner off because we don't need that there. Now I take a third piece of ribbon, and this one's about 2 inches in length, and I fold the ends in toward the center, so it's kind of folded in thirds, but I just want that center piece of ribbon. And I take my hot glue and I wrap that around the center to cover that pipe cleaner to give it a polished look. Last step on this bow, all I'm going to do is grab my scissors and dovetail the ends. Now I'm going to make my hanger for this ornament, and I take the hot glue and I'm just going to hot glue the hanger at the bottom, making it look like a little fish. Then we'll flip it over and hot glue that to the back of our ornament. And once we have the hanger in place, I will then hot glue our bow to the front of our ornament. Now this third ornament is all ready to hang. I just love how this all turns out. Here is all 3 of them together as a set. And I just think these are adorable. They definitely look more high-end than something you'd buy at the Dollar Tree. And these would be great for gifts, a gift tag on a present, or on your tree. I would love to hear what you think. Feel free to leave a comment below. And if you're enjoying this content, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps our channel grow. I found these tags at the Dollar Tree, and I love the little flip-flops on the top of them. So what I am going to do is I'm using my Cricut tool here, and I'm just trying to pry these off without breaking them. And I wasn't getting very far with that Cricut tool, so I did grab a screwdriver, and that gave me enough leverage to snap these off of the tags. And now that I have the flip-flops removed, I will save the tags for another craft, and we are going to take these flip-flops and transform them. Using a paintable surface, and I'm just taping them down to that piece of cardboard so they will be easier for me to paint. And I grab my multi-surface black acrylic paint, and this is in a satin finish, and I want to paint the bottom of our flip-flops the black. So these are the soles of the shoes. Once these are dry, I go ahead and flip them back over and tape them back down to our piece of cardboard. Grabbing my Waverly chalk paint in the color Maze, and I'm doing 2 coats of yellow paint over the top of our flip-flops. Now, while those are drying, I grab out some of this air dry clay and this cute mold that I have. And these are from Stampery. And I'm using the long piece here. So I'm just making a little snake, and then I'm going to press that clay down into the mold. And once I have everything pressed down, I just use my fingers to take any excess off. And I flip the mold over and pop that one out. And then I'm going to make a second one. While I'm playing with the... Now that we have our 2 pieces of clay, I am taking my Elaine's tacky glue, and I'm just going to draw out where I want my flip-flops. So I'm using my Cricut tool to cut the clay, but you could use a butter knife or just a regular paring knife or anything like that. I found that this clay is just really easy to work with. Now, once you're satisfied with your flip-flops and putting that clay on there, these will need to be set aside to dry for about 24 hours. So the next day, I took my Waverly chalk paint in the color white and a very skinny paintbrush, and I'm going to paint the clay with the white chalk paint. And I grabbed my heat tool just to help assist the drying process because I wanted to move on to the next step. I'm taking my Mod Podge in matte, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to paint the yellow portion of the flip-flops. Next, I'm going to take this piece of cardboard and place it on top of a piece of copy paper, and using some glitter that is in the color yellow, we're going to dust that over the top of the Mod Podge. And I have that piece of paper underneath me just to catch any excess, so we don't waste any of that fun glitter. To keep the glitter from just flaking off, I am going to seal this with glossy spray Mod Podge. Now here is what our adorable little flip-flops look like. Now you could hang these separately and make 2 ornaments, but I wanted to put these together, so I'm using some hot glue, and I am just gonna hot glue them on the heel of the flip-flop to each other. Once those are attached, I flip this over and I'm using a pendant hanger, and I'll link these in my description box below. I did get them on Amazon in a big package. These things work great for adding hangers to different things. I've used them in jewelry making and in ornament making, and usually you can get like 200 of them for a very small price. And I'm just gonna glue that onto the back using my E6000, and that does take a little bit for it to adhere, so I do put a clip on there just to help maintain this pressure onto that piece. Now for some final touches. I am using black ribbon here, and this is satin ribbon as well, and it's about 1/4 inch wide, and I'm just tying a little knot at the top there. And I thought it needed a little bit more, so I started pulling out different bows, and I wasn't liking anything I was finding. I tried different white ones and some checkered ones, so I decided on going with just a plain black bow. I thought that made it look a little bit elegant, and I'm just gonna hot glue that right underneath the hook there. And that's all there is to it. This adorable flip-flop ornament is ready to hang or give as a gift. I think these turned out amazing. They are one of my favorite ornaments that I've made to date. These wood round ornaments are a staple in the craft store, and I love them. I know a lot of people do them. I've done different varieties of them in the past, so I want to show you another twist on what you can do with these. In this video, I'm just going to tape down 3 of these wood circles onto a piece of cardboard, and I'm using my folk art chalk paint, and I'm going to paint the tops of these, and I'm not going to paint all the way to the bark. I want to still see a little bit of that wood. Now I'm using my heat tool to make sure that these are nice and dry before we move on to the next step. So I'm taking this farmhouse stencil, and I did get this on Amazon, and I will link all of these down in my description box below. You'll also be able to find these on my Amazon store. So I'm just gonna cut all of these little squares out, and I love these stencils. If you haven't tried these before, you should give them a try. They're a self-adhesive stencil. They are washable, so you can use them multiple times. All you have to do is wash them under some warm water with some soap, and then you rinse them off and place them right back on the piece of paper that came with the stencil when you bought them. Now I'm going to take a few of these stencils and put them on top of my rounds. What you see me doing here is trying to fit the right stencil to the round. Each one of these rounds are slightly different in size, so I want to be flexible and make sure I fit the right stencil to the right round. Now using my redesigned chalk paste in vintage lace, I'm going to squeegee that over the top of these stencils. And I do get these products on Amazon, so I will link them in the description box below. Now I remove these stencils when everything is still wet, and then I'm gonna go and wash the stencils and let these dry for a few minutes. To seal the chalk paste in, I'm using my Jolene finishing wax and a lint-free towel, and just going ahead and doing a nice light coat over the top. Now to add our hangers, I'm using jute twine, and I'm just gonna string that through the eye hook and tie a little knot. For our final touch, I made 3 little black and white bows for each one of these. So I'm just using some hot glue and I'm just going to attach them right at the top underneath the eye hook. And that's all there is to it for these beautiful farmhouse ornaments. These would go great as a gift or on any sort of farmhouse themed tree. You could also use these year-round since they aren't very Christmassy. So these could definitely be used in a tiered tray or to decorate any decor items. So for this craft, we're going to start out with some shower curtain rings from the Dollar Tree. The first thing I'm going to do is glue that shower curtain ring shut, so that way it's a single ring. Next, I grabbed some fun yarn. This is that big yarn that you would use to make those chunky blankets with. Using a dab of hot glue on our shower curtain ring, I'll take the yarn and I'll go ahead and attach that to the ring. And then I'm just going to wrap the yarn around the ring until we cover the whole entire ring. And every 2 or 3 wraps, I do add a little bit of hot glue because I want to make sure this stays on nice and tight. And now that our wreath is complete, I'm going to go ahead and add a ribbon to the wreath to make for our hanger. And this step is optional, but I don't want the knot to show on the hanger. So I'm going to go ahead and hot glue that to the wreath, and we're going to cover that with some embellishments. So I found this greenery at the Dollar Tree this year, and I really like it. It looks very rustic, but also very authentic. And I just go ahead and I cut 2 little pieces off, and I'm going to make a little swag. And in the center of the swag, I'm going to hot glue 3 little silver and white balls. And you could do whatever color you'd like, but I thought these little berries looked cute. And now this ornament is complete and ready to hang on your tree. I just love how this one turned out. So I found this really cozy fabric at the Dollar Tree and thought, let's make an ornament out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and just unwrap the fabric so that way we can cut a small piece out of the fabric. And I like these wood stars from the Dollar Tree, but I wanted to do something a little bit different with it. So we're going to cover this with the fabric. Once we have our fabric cut out, I did want to add my hanger to my star shape before we started gluing the fabric on. So you'll see me here adding a little hanger to our star, and we're going to hot glue that to the piece of wood. Next, we're going to go ahead and hot glue the fabric to the star. We're not going to try cutting it out first. I want to glue the fabric on the star first. So that's what you're going to see me doing on both sides of the star. So now that our fabric is glued to our star, I'm taking some very sharp scissors and I'm going to just cut the star shape out. And while you're cutting the star shape out, just be careful not to cut the hanger. Now for the next step here, I'm using a corded ribbon and we're going to hot glue that all the way around the edge of the star, and this will just finish our ornament off and make it look so cute. And now that our trim is attached, our star is complete, ready to hang on our tree. If you like what you're seeing so far, please hit that subscribe button below. So I found these beautiful napkins on Amazon the other day, and I thought these would be so cute for decoupaging. So we're going to use them on our ornaments. So we're going to start out with a wood sliced ornament, and you've probably seen these at Dollar Tree or other craft stores, and this is a great base for our beautiful craft. Next, we're going to paint this with some white Waverly chalk paint. And while that is drying, I'm going to go ahead and measure out a small circle on the back side of the napkin. And this is the piece of the napkin that I want to use for decoupaging on our ornament. Once we have our circle cut out, I do remove the other layers on the back side of the napkin so that we're only using the top layer of our napkin. So now let's grab some Mod Podge and go ahead and paint a nice layer of the Mod Podge over the top of our wood slice. And once our Mod Podge has completely dried, I lay the piece of napkin over the top of our wood slice. Next, I grab a piece of parchment paper and my hot iron, and I just iron my napkin right onto the ornament. And using my zip sander, I go ahead and I sand off any excess napkin on our ornament. Now let's grab our Mod Podge again and then paint a nice thin coat over the top of our napkin to seal our ornament. And once everything is dry, I use some ribbon and I'm going to go ahead and make a hanger for our ornament. And I'm just going to weave that through on the eye hook there and just tie a knot at the top of our ribbon. And to complete our ornament, I'm going to go ahead and add a cute gingham bow to the top of our ornament with some hot glue. And now our ornament is complete and ready to display on our tree. Let's start out with these wood-shaped snowflakes that I found at the Dollar Tree. So we're going to grab some twine and I'm going to cut a piece that's about 12 inches in length. And we're going to weave it through the center of our snowflake. Next, let's grab some Scotch tape and we're going to go ahead and tape the two pieces of twine together and wrap that around so it's almost like a shoelace. And this will make it so much easier to add our beads. Once I added my beads, I did forget to tie a knot, so I did add a knot on the end of the snowflake so that they wouldn't push the snowflake in a weird direction. Now let's tie a knot at the top of our string and cut off the excess Scotch tape. So now let's add our embellishments. I found these beautiful paper flowers at the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to add one of each flowers on each side of our snowflake. Next, I'm using my gold ribbon, and this is the really thin gold ribbon, and I made a tiny little bow. I'm going to hot glue this bow to the knot at the bottom of our beads. And what a cute, fun ornament to make. These would fit nice on a regular sized tree or work really well on a small mini tree. So I found these cinnamon pine cones at the Dollar Tree, and these work great for ornaments. We're also going to need some fake fur and a scarf from the Dollar Tree. Our first step is cutting a 2x2 square, approximately, doesn't have to be perfect, from the fur. Next, we're going to hot glue the fur to our pine cone. When I hot glue it about 3/4 of the way up on the pine cone because I still want a little bit of that pine cone showing on the top. Now we'll set the pine cone aside for a few minutes and we're going to grab our scarf, and I'm going to cut a 6-inch square from our scarf. To make sure that we have a nice edge, I'm going to go ahead and hot glue a little piece of the scarf down on top of itself because I want to use that fold around the pine cone, and that's going to go over the top of the fur. And we're going to go ahead and hot glue that piece of scarf to each other on the back side of this pine cone. So I'm going to continue to hot glue the scarf to each other to make almost like a tube on the top of our pine cone. Now I'm going to grab some polyfill and fill the top of our pine cone hat up with some polyfill. Once I have my hat to the height that I would like it, I'm taking a ribbon. I'm just going to tie a knot at the top of where the hat should end. Now I found these pom-pom makers at the Dollar Tree a few months ago, and I'm going to use the blue one here to make a little pom-pom. And using some yarn, I'm just going to wrap that yarn around the side of this pom-pom maker. And you go ahead and you just wrap it around as many times as you'd like for as thick of a pom-pom as you would like to have. And once I get that side done, I'm going to repeat this step on the opposite side. And we're just going to cut the piece of yarn about 4 inches too long, just so we have something to tie the pom-pom up with later on. So now that we have both sides complete, we fold them together and make our circle. Next, I grab a pair of sharp scissors and I'm going to trim down the center where we just finished wrapping. And there's a little groove in the pom-pom maker that makes it easier to do. Now I'm going to take the piece of string that we were using earlier and we're going to wrap that around where that groove is, because that groove actually has a line that goes all the way down to the center, which allows you to tie a knot on that pom-pom. For good measures, I'm going to go ahead and wrap one more piece of yarn down that groove and tie a second set of knots, because I just want to make sure this pom-pom stays together. Now's the fun part. You get to unwrap your pom-pom maker and see how your pom-pom turns out. And once we remove the pom-pom, you are going to need to give it a small haircut to trim up some of those pieces of yarn so it all is even. And once you're satisfied with your pom-pom, I go ahead and I tie that pom-pom around the top of our hat. And now that our pom-pom is attached, I'm going to trim off any excess pieces of that scarf so that the pom-pom is at the very top of the hat. And then this would be a great time to trim any of that extra ribbon or pieces of yarn, just so that the hat looks nice and finished on the top. Before we forget, we do need a hanger for our ornament. So I do take a piece of ribbon and I tie that around the pom-pom. And then I'm going to make a loop and then tie that together so that way we have a way of hanging our little gnome on our Christmas tree. Now the beard is a little bit square and big, so I am going to take my scissors and I'm just going to trim it up just to make it more beard shaped. To make sure that that beard stays in place, I do add a little bit extra hot glue. And now for our last step, I do hot glue a wood bead underneath the hat and to the beard. And now our happy little gnome is ready to hang on our Christmas tree. And if you're enjoying this video, please hit that subscribe button below. So for our next craft, we're going to use a pine cone, a snowflake ornament, and a small wood slice. We're going to start out by spray painting our pine cone. And I'm just going to use some white spray paint for this pine cone. So while the pine cone is drying, we're going to take our ornament and our slice, and I'm going to add a little piece of tape to each of them so they don't move around when we're trying to paint them. I'm taping these pieces onto a paintable surface, and we're going to grab our chalk paint in the color white. And now we're going to go ahead and paint both sides of each of these pieces. So we'll start out with one side, let that dry, and then we'll flip them over and get the other side as well. And once our paint has dried, I'm going to go ahead and give a coat of Mod Podge on the top of our snowflake. And we're going to then add some fake snow over the top of that Mod Podge while it is still wet. So I got one of these bags of snow at Dollar Tree, and they work out great for different crafts like this. And once our snowflake has dried, I went ahead and added a hanger to the top of our snowflake. Now let's put our little angel together. We're going to start by hot gluing the wood slice to the top of our pine cone, and that's going to be the head for our little angel. Next, we'll hot glue our pine cone to the snowflake, and you're going to have to press down pretty hard on the snowflake to get the pine cone to stick to it because it's not a very even surface. And now our Pinecone Angel is complete. She is so beautiful. Now let's hang her on the tree with our other ornaments. So this craft is starting out with a wood tag that I found at the Dollar Tree, and it's about 1 inch thick. And I'm going to use some of these fun stencils that I found on Amazon. And this little set comes for like $6.99, and you get 6 stencils in the set. So it's a great value, and they're washable and reusable. So for our first step here, we're going to use some antique wax from Waverly, and we're going to stain our block. And once that is completely dry, I'm grabbing some plaster Waverly chalk paint, and we're just going to whitewash the block on both sides. And once our block is completely dry, I'm going to use some painter's tape to make a rectangle so that I have a place that I can paint with some chalk paint. So this will work out really well with our stencil here. So I just am realigning the blue tape until we get it to the way we like it. Next step here, I'm using Folk Art chalkboard paint, and I want to use this on purpose because if you can see there's a little square on my stencil that says the number of days until Santa stops here, and I want to be able to fill that in using some chalk. So I'm going to do 2 thick coats of this paint on here just to make sure that I have enough paste on this to be able to use our chalk in the square. And once I removed the paint, I decided to just take a little bit more chalk paint and just paint around it to make it a little bit more rustic and not so straight lined. And I thought that looked a little better. And once everything is completely dry, we put our stencil on top of that paint. Now to paint the stencil on, I'm using Redesign chalk paste. And this I did get on Amazon, and the color is Vintage Lace, and all the links are in my description box below. Just click on the Amazon store there. And once everything is completely dry, we're going to go ahead and reattach the string at the top of our tag. Could stop here, but I thought this needed a little bit more embellishments, so I'm adding a little bit of greenery to the top of the tag. And I did get this greenery at the Dollar Tree. It's one of their new picks this year. And then I'm going to add just a mini pine cone in the center. And I thought this would be beautiful to hang on a tree, but I'm actually going to use it on my tiered tray. And wow, I love how this turned out. For this ornament, we're starting out with a shower curtain ring. And you can get a bunch of these at the Dollar Tree. I believe it's 12 in a pack for $1.25, so you can get quite a few ornaments out of it. Now let's grab some macrame rope and some twine. And what I'm doing here is just cutting them into nice little strips in 6-inch lengths. Now grab your hot glue gun and take the shower curtain ring and make sure it's locked into place, and then just seal it with a little bit of hot glue. We just want to make sure that this doesn't pop open on us while we're making our fun ornament here. Now I'm just going to take the twine and the macrame rope, and I'm just going to loop it up and around the ornament here. And we're just going to make almost like a big old sunshine. So we're just going white macrame rope, and then we're going to do twine, and then the white, and then the twine. A quick note here. I'm not going to go the full length around the ring. We're just going to go all the way around, and we're just going to skip where it's hooked together. We're going to cover that up later on. And so you'll see that it's almost like a really tight U, and we're not going to cover up that one little spot. all the string tight and in place, I'm going to grab my hot glue gun and just put a tiny bit of hot glue at the edges here, just so that it doesn't move around too much. So once that hot glue dries, we'll grab some Mod Podge and matte, and we'll just do a light coat all the way around the ring of the ornament. So we'll set that aside to dry. And now let's go ahead and grab some stars. And these are just some fun wood cutouts that I got from the Dollar Tree last year, but you can usually find them at the craft store as well. And I'm using my Waverly Antique Wax, and I'm just going to coat them so that we can go ahead and wipe off some of that wax, and it's going to give it a stained look. And then what I'll do next is we're going to grab some of our Waverly white chalk paint. And then we're going to do a little whitewash over the top of these. While we're painting the stars, I just wanted to share how much I love Christmas time. One of the favorite things I like to do at Christmas is watch Christmas movies and make crafts. What is something you like to do at Christmas? So once all the paint dries, I'm going to grab some Rub and Buff, and I'm just going to put a little bit down on the piece of cardboard here. And I'll grab a small rag, and it's a lint-free rag, and I'm just going to use it with a dab of the Rub and Buff, and we're just going to just slightly rub over the top of the star on both sides. Now let's set those stars aside to dry. I'm going to go back to the ornament, and we're just going to go ahead and untwist all of the strings, and it's going to kind of give it a more of a lion look. And this step does require a little bit of patience. It takes a while to untwist all of those little strings. And there is a little bit of fuzz that will come out, so be prepared to have to vacuum up some of that fuzz, especially from those twines. But once you're done, it's going to look so amazing. Next, I'm going to put this down on the flat surface, and I'm using just a comb, and we're just going to comb all of that string out, and this gets rid of any of the extra fuzz and gives it a nice smooth look. Once you're satisfied with combing out the strings, go ahead and grab a nice pair of sharp scissors, and we're just going to give it a little bit of a haircut and trim all the way around. And I always start a little longer than what I want, and then I take the scissors and I come back and I just try to even it up. When you're satisfied with the look of your ornament, go ahead and grab some small twine or string, and we're going to make a loop for hanging our ornament up at the top where the hook of the ring was. And I'm just going to tie a simple knot on both ends, one closer to the ornament and then one up at the top, so that it will hang nice when we put that on our tree. Let's decorate the top of our wreath. I grabbed some picks that I had from last year, and one of these picks is from the Dollar Tree, the gold one, and the greenery was from Walmart, and it has a little bit of a sparkle in it. And I'm going to use a little bit of both, and I'm mixing gold and silver with my tree this year, so this is kind of new for me. I'm not a big gold person, but we're going to add gold. So the greenery has a little bit of silver sparkles in it, and we're just going to glue that on as a swag. And then I'll add the little pieces of gold to the top of the swag. Then we'll add a star right in the center, and that will cover up that ring where it connects so you won't even see it. To ensure that the star really stays in place, I suggest holding the star in place with the hot glue until it's totally set. It does take a few minutes, but I feel like it does give it a little bit of a better hold. I love how this ornament turned out. It's so elegant. It's all ready to go and hang on your tree. For this craft, you're going to need some mini tin buckets. I got these at the Dollar Tree, and they have them all over in the different sections. Some of them are white, some are festive with different colors, but we're going to go ahead and just take the little hooks off the side, and then we're going to set these outside and we're going to spray paint them in some gold spray paint. And with these buckets, I found it was easier to do really light coats and more coats to cover everything. So I decided to try out this little drill I got from Temu, and it did drill a nice little hole down the top of the bucket, but it was not quite big enough. And of course it didn't come with bigger drill bits, so I had to grab out the bigger drill and drill a nicer hole in there. So all we're doing is just putting one hole in the bottom of each of these buckets, and we're going to turn these buckets into bells. Start out with some pearls that I got from the Dollar Tree, and these were the size 12 mm, and some ribbon and a small little bell. And what we're going to do here is we're going to take the ribbon and we're going to just put that through that hole that we just drilled. The ribbon that I'm using is just a basic satin ribbon. It's a 1/4 inch wide, and I'm going to cut a strip about 19 inches. And I found that was the easiest size to make these bells. So once you string the ribbon through the bucket the first time, we're going to actually string it through again a second time to make a loop at the top. And it is a little bit harder to get that ribbon through the second time. So what I used was some skewers from the kitchen, and I just used the skewer to poke the ribbon through the hole. Once I have everything even out, and I have about 4 inches of ribbon at the bottom part of the bucket, I'm going to add the bell. And you can kind of see here, I'm going to put the string through going the opposite direction, and then I'm going to tie a little knot so that the bell stays on there. And I actually tie this 2 or 3 times because I really don't want that bell to fall out. And then I'll cut off any excess ribbon so that it looks a little bit nicer. And now that the bell is attached, we're going to go ahead and add another knot in the ribbon, and it's going to be about 1 inch above the bell inside of the bucket. So it does take 2 or 3 knots because we want it to not be able to go through that hole that we drilled, and this will just keep the bell where we want it. If you're still watching, please press that like button below. We're going to take those pearl beads and we're going to put that at the top of the bell. So I'm just going to twist the ribbon, and this worked pretty well where I was able to then string the beads over the top of both sides of the ribbon. If that doesn't work for you, go ahead and use that skewer again, and it just will help you poke the ribbon through the bead. So I grab my old scrapbooking materials and I grab out what I want to say are brads, and I keep not being able to find the exact words for these, but they're just like a little metal circle, and they poke right into those little holes there, and they work perfect for sealing off these buckets. You could also use push pins from the Dollar Tree and push them in and cut off the tips, or you could use ribbon around the bottom of the bells to cover those holes. Or you could glue another bead over those holes or a string of beads. But there's so many different things you could do to cover those holes. And once you've covered the holes on those buckets, I'm going to embellish the bell with a simple bow. And this is a wired bow. It's about 1 inch thick. And I got this ribbon at Hobby Lobby on clearance. And I'm just going to glue that right onto the front of the bow. But if you wanted, you could also decorate it with flowers or any other sort of items to make it fit your decor. And then once that hot glue is all set, we have a beautiful little bell that we can hang on our tree. For this craft, we're going to use 4 canning lids, and these ones were already used for other canning items. So I just wanted to wash these really good. And then what I'll do here is I'm going to go ahead and spray paint the back side of these lids. So I painted these lids with gold metallic spray paint, and it took 2 coats of spray paint on the back side of these lids, and I did 2 coats on the front side as well. Once these were completely dry, I took my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and I'm just going to paint the inside part of the lid. And for this, I did do 2 coats of paint on the inside of the lids. I took this candlestick holder that I found at the Dollar Tree because it was the right size for the inside of the lid, and I used it as a way to trace on a napkin here a circle. And we're going to just cut a circle out of the napkin, and we're going to decoupage this onto the lid. And I found that it was easier to cut the circles out without having pulled the napkin apart. And then once the circle was cut out, I did separate out the top layer of the napkin, and I'm only going to use that layer on the lid here. Next, we went ahead and we put some Mod Podge down onto the lid, and I'm using a piece of clear plastic wrap, and I'm just tapping down the piece of napkin. And once that's completely dry, I'll take another coat of the Mod Podge, and we're just going to do a thin layer over the top of the napkin to seal everything in. While that's drying, I'm going to grab some ribbon, and we're just going to cut some 12-inch strips of ribbon, and we're going to use this to make a loop on the back side of the lids. And to make the loop, we're just going to go ahead and tie a knot at the bottom of the ribbon. And for this next step here, we're just going to hot glue the knot on the back side of this canning lid. And I'm just going to do that again here to show you. And I'm using my little tool that I have from the Dollar Tree. It's just a makeup applicator tool, and it works really good for hot glue. And I'm just using that to press down the hot glue so I don't burn my fingers when I'm doing this. Now I made 2 different bows out of 2 different types of ribbon, and I was trying to decide which one I liked better, and I went with the gold. I don't know why I like that one better, but I don't know. They both look good, but I went with the gold because I thought that one looked a little nicer. So I go ahead and I attach that with some hot glue, and I clip that on just to make sure gives it more time to adhere to the lid. And when we're all done, we have 3 beautiful ornaments.